did. But the important thing here is that our plan for change, which is the steps that we're taking as a government to create a stronger and more resilient economy, are now more important than ever. As the Prime Minister said this morning, the world has changed. We knew that already on security and defence. It's now true on global trade. And that's why we have to go further and faster into investing in the economy and supporting businesses.
OK, so if the world has changed, then surely it's an idea particularly to scrap the increase to employers' national insurance. We've got businesses on their knees. We've got Richard Walker, who was literally a poster boy for the Labour's election campaign. He's the CEO of Iceland, saying that basically you're robbing businesses blind. We're not a piggy bank for Labour, he says. We've got the growth forecast down. We've now been hit by tariffs. We've got the car industry on its knees, and yet still you're taxing businesses.
The political scandal involving Keir Starmer has become one of the most significant crises in British politics in recent memory. At the heart of this controversy is the ruling by the UK Supreme Court, which has called into question the legality of Starmer's handling of a policy that was meant to be a cornerstone of his government's economic recovery plan. The £22 billion that was intended to fund essential social welfare programmes and stimulate economic growth is now at the centre of a storm of accusations, with critics accusing Starmer of gross financial mismanagement. This massive sum of money meant to provide aid to vulnerable communities seems to have vanished without a trace, and the public is demanding answers. What was intended as a step toward the country's recovery has now spiraled into one of the most significant scandals in British political history. The court's decision, which was unanimous and devastating for Starmer, could mark the beginning of the end for his political career. The ruling not only struck down the controversial policy but also painted a picture of an administration that had overreached its powers and acted without the necessary checks and balances. The legal community had warned of the risks involved, but Starmer's government pressed ahead, ignoring the warnings and pushing through a policy that now appears to have been both reckless and unlawful. The Supreme Court's decision to nullify the policy has sent shockwaves through Westminster, with politicians, legal experts, and the public alike questioning how such a vast sum of money could be mismanaged so egregiously. The ruling is not just about a failed policy, it speaks to a broader issue of trust in government. How could the British people be expected to trust a leader whose administration has been found to have violated fundamental legal principles? The consequences of this decision are far-reaching, and Starmer now finds himself in the eye of a political storm. The public's fury is palpable, with calls for his resignation growing louder with each passing day. The once unified Labour Party now faces an uncertain future, with its leader's credibility hanging by a thread. This case has exposed not just financial mismanagement but a deep-seated problem with accountability in the government. The question on everyone's mind is whether Starmer can survive this scandal or whether it will be the event that ends his political career. The British public, already disillusioned with years of political turmoil, is demanding answers, and the pressure on Starmer to step down is intensifying. With the monarchy now involved and the public unrest growing, the stakes could not be higher for Keir Starmer and his political future. The Supreme Court ruling on the £22 billion scandal has sent shockwaves throughout British politics, leaving Keir Starmer's leadership hanging in the balance. The decision to label his government's policy as unlawful has not only jeopardized his political career but also unleashed a wave of public outrage and legal scrutiny. Starmer's position as leader of the Labour Party has never been more precarious. What was initially touted as a much-needed investment in social welfare programs and economic recovery now stands as a glaring symbol of financial mismanagement and constitutional overreach. The £22 billion, earmarked for vital projects such as healthcare, education and housing, has seemingly vanished without any proper explanation or accountability. The ruling by the UK Supreme Court emphasised the lack of transparency and oversight in the government's handling of public funds, which is a fundamental issue that has eroded public trust. The court's unanimous verdict condemning the policy has further fueled calls for Starmer's resignation, with many now questioning his ability to lead the country in light of such a monumental failure. The fact that the ruling is not just a political blow but a legal one makes this scandal even more damaging. The Supreme Court's involvement has added a level of credibility to the accusations of corruption and mismanagement, making it difficult for Starmer to brush off the scandal as mere political opposition. As the public becomes increasingly aware of the scale of the financial debacle, the pressure on Starmer to explain where the money went and how it was spent has reached a boiling point. The British public, who have already witnessed years of political controversies, are no longer willing to accept vague reassurances. or evasive responses. They demand answers, and the media is eager to hold Starmer accountable for the lost billions. The ruling has also created a ripple effect, leading to calls for a broader inquiry into the Labour Party's financial dealings, especially regarding the allocation and tracking of public funds. Political rivals have seized upon this scandal to attack Starmer's credibility, using the £22 billion fiasco as a key talking point in the lead-up to the next election. The Conservative Party, emboldened by the Supreme Court ruling, is using this moment to accuse Starmer of failing the British people, highlighting the Labour leader's inability to manage the country's finances effectively. Meanwhile, within Starmer's own party, cracks are beginning to form. Senior Labour figures are growing nervous, with some already discussing the possibility of a leadership challenge. If Starmer fails to address the financial crisis and restore confidence, the Labour Party could face an even deeper crisis, potentially leading to a loss of electoral support. With every passing day, the calls for his resignation grow louder, and the public's patience is wearing thin. The once promising Labour leader now faces the unenviable task of salvaging what remains of his political career, all while navigating the fallout of one of the largest financial scandals in British history. As the investigation into the missing £22 billion intensifies, Starmer's political future seems increasingly uncertain, with the public and political establishment alike demanding swift answers and accountability. The implications of the Supreme Court's ruling on the £22 billion scandal have sent ripples through British politics, causing intense scrutiny of Keir Starmer's leadership and the future of the Labour Party. As the leader of the opposition, Starmer's credibility has been severely tarnished by the court's unanimous decision that deemed his government's handling of public funds unlawful. The ruling has not only exposed significant financial mismanagement, but has also raised deep concerns about the transparency and accountability of the Labour Party's internal operations. The £22 billion, which was intended to fund critical economic recovery programmes and social welfare initiatives, has effectively disappeared without clear justification or explanation, sparking widespread outrage across the country. For many, the loss of such a substantial amount of public money signifies not just a failure of governance, but a betrayal of the British people. In the wake of the ruling, public trust in Starmer's leadership has been shattered, with increasing calls for his resignation and demands for a full inquiry into the handling of these funds. The scandal has become a flashpoint, with the media relentlessly reporting on every new revelation, further escalating the pressure on Starmer to account for the missing money. Within the Labour Party, the atmosphere is one of growing tension. Members of Parliament who had once been staunch allies of Starmer are now beginning to question his leadership and whether he can continue to represent the party in light of the scandal. Behind closed doors, discussions are already taking place about potential alternatives to Starmer's leadership, with some arguing that the party's chances in the next election could be at risk if he remains at the helm. The political fallout from the Supreme Court ruling has also been compounded by the intense media focus on Starmer's role in the scandal. His repeated denials and attempts to downplay the significance of the court's decision have done little to quell public anger. In fact, his refusal to take full responsibility has only served to deepen the perception that he is unable to provide the leadership necessary to restore the Labour Party's credibility. The public's frustration is palpable, with widespread protests calling for transparency and accountability. The question of whether Starmer can weather the storm is now the central concern for both the Labour Party and the British public. With each passing day, the pressure on him intensifies, and his ability to hold on to power appears increasingly tenuous. As investigations into the missing £22 billion continue, the Labour Party faces an uncertain future, and Starmer's political survival is at risk. The clock is ticking, and the next steps in this unfolding crisis will determine whether Starmer can restore his credibility, or if the scandal will mark the end of his political career. The £22 billion scandal has not only put Keir Starmer's leadership in jeopardy, but has also sparked a broader conversation about accountability and transparency in British politics. The fallout from the Supreme Court's ruling is not confined to Starmer alone. It has thrown the entire Labour Party into a state of disarray, as both the public and party members demand answers. The ruling, which found the government's handling of public funds to be unlawful, has severely undermined the trust that the public once placed in Starmer and his leadership. The public outcry has been swift and fierce, with protests erupting across the country and calls for Starmer's resignation growing louder by the day. The political consequences of the ruling are still unfolding, but one thing is clear: the Labour Party's image has been severely damaged, and its ability to recover from this scandal is uncertain. The £22 billion intended for vital social welfare programs and economic recovery efforts, has now disappeared without a trace, and the British public is demanding to know why. Transparency about the fund's allocation has been non-existent, leading many to speculate about possible corruption, financial mismanagement, or even deliberate concealment of the truth. As the investigation into the scandal deepens, more revelations are expected, and the pressure on Starmer continues to mount. The once unified Labour Party is now facing internal divisions, with many MPs starting to question Starmer's ability to lead. Some party members are already discussing the possibility of a leadership challenge, with a growing number calling for him to step down to salvage what is left of the party's credibility. This level of internal dissent is rare within the Labour Party, but the scale of the scandal has made it impossible for party members to ignore the deepening crisis. The spotlight is now on Starmer's leadership and whether he can recover from this financial debacle. However, his repeated denials and failure to take responsibility for the missing funds have only served to alienate the public further. His credibility has been shattered, and it appears increasingly unlikely that he will be able to restore public trust in the party under his leadership. The British public, already disillusioned with years of political scandals, is now questioning whether Starmer is fit to lead the country. The court's ruling and the subsequent media frenzy have exposed the lack of oversight within the Labour government, and this failure has become the focal point of public anger. As the investigation continues, the question remains: can Starmer survive this scandal, or will it mark the end of his political career? The fate of the Labour Party, and Starmer himself, hangs in the balance as the nation waits for answers. The ongoing £22 billion scandal has triggered intense scrutiny not only of Keir Starmer's leadership but also of the Labour Party as a whole. The Supreme Court ruling, which deemed the handling of the funds unlawful, has dealt a devastating blow to Starmer's credibility, leaving his political future hanging by a thread. The scale of the financial mismanagement has sparked public outrage, with many questioning how such a significant sum could disappear without any clear answers or accountability. What was intended to be a strategic investment in the nation's recovery and welfare programs has instead become one of the most significant political scandals in recent history. As new details continue to emerge, it is becoming evident that the Labour government's failure to properly manage these funds is far more than a mere oversight. The public's trust in Starmer has rapidly eroded, and his attempts to deflect blame and deny any personal involvement have only fueled the fire. The backlash from both the public and within the Labour Party has been swift and overwhelming. Even Starmer's most loyal allies are beginning to distance themselves, with some senior figures suggesting that the party may need to consider a change in leadership to recover from the damage done. The crisis has brought the Labour Party's internal divisions into sharp focus, with differing opinions on how to move forward. Some party members are calling for Starmer's resignation, while others worry about the long-term implications of losing the leader at such a critical time. The pressure on Starmer continues to mount, as new revelations about the missing funds and potential cover-ups come to light. Whistleblowers from within the government have started to speak out, revealing disturbing details about how the £22 billion was misallocated and potentially hidden from public scrutiny. These revelations have only added fuel to the fire, with many now calling for a full investigation into the matter. The Labour Party's credibility is now at an all-time low, and it seems as though Starmer's leadership is in its final days. The party's image, already tarnished by years of political turmoil, is now teetering on the edge of irrelevance. The media, once supportive of Starmer as a beacon of change, is now turning against him, amplifying the public's growing frustration. The focus has shifted from political ideology to scandal, and the questions surrounding the missing £22 billion have become emblematic of the failures of the Labour leadership. The stakes are higher than ever, and the future of the Labour Party is uncertain. What was once seen as a promising political agenda has now become a devastating political liability. As the scandal continues to unfold, it is unclear whether Starmer will be able to salvage his reputation, or if this scandal will be the final chapter in his political career. The pressure is mounting, and time is running out for Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. As the £22 billion scandal continues to unfold, the political ramifications for Keir Starmer and the Labour Party are becoming increasingly severe. The fallout from the Supreme Court's damning ruling has cast a long shadow over Starmer's leadership, with both his personal integrity and the party's future now in question. The public's fury has been palpable, with protests erupting across the UK, demanding transparency and accountability from a government that has failed to provide satisfactory answers. Even more concerning for Starmer, however, is the growing discontent within his own party. Longtime supporters and key allies have started to distance themselves from his leadership, fearing that his handling of the scandal could lead to irreparable damage to the Labour Party's credibility. The calls for Starmer's resignation have become louder, with numerous MPs privately discussing the possibility of a leadership challenge. As the pressure mounts, it's becoming clear that the political landscape for Starmer is rapidly deteriorating. Whistleblowers from within the Labour government have begun to surface, shedding light on the full extent of the financial mismanagement and alleged cover-ups surrounding the £22 billion sterling.com. These revelations have further fueled public outrage, with critics demanding that those responsible be held accountable. The idea of a transparent investigation into the handling of the funds is no longer just a political necessity. It is seen as essential to restoring any semblance of trust in the government. The Labour Party, once united under Starmer's leadership, now finds itself fractured, with divisions deepening as members struggle to reconcile their loyalty to their leader with the growing scandal. For some, it's no longer a question of whether Starmer can survive, but whether the Labour Party itself can weather the storm. The future of the party now hangs in the balance. In the midst of this crisis, King Charles, a figure traditionally detached from political affairs, has found himself drawn into the drama, with speculation mounting about whether the monarchy will take a more active role in addressing the scandal. The situation continues to unfold, and as each new detail emerges, it becomes increasingly clear that Keir Starmer's political career and possibly the future of the Labour Party may not survive this scandal. See you soon.